Odyssey. You're watching the Health Track presented by Healthline Media at Advertising Week. Please put your hands together because it's time for the next session. Welcome everyone to the stage.
Hello everyone, my name is Lori Dewan from Healthline Media. I am so happy to be here with you in this room. And I want to also welcome everybody who's streaming remote. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We welcome you as well. But for those of you who are here in the room, I just want to start by asking, for how many of you, is this your first time back at an event like this, a big show, a big gathering, in quite a while? Yeah, me too, right? It feels new, it feels exciting. To actually be with you all. But then at the same time, it's a return. This is what I love to do most. I love to be with people who are inspired about our work, have new ideas that can challenge me, hopefully bring you insights that challenge you as well, and to have these kinds of conversations in a room to share energy. And I think that's really appropriate to what we're going to be talking about today here on this stage. Because we'll be talking a lot today about the future of wellness, the future of health. And you are going to hear from some incredible speakers. The lineup in this room today and the innovation stage is pretty amazing, actually. At the same time, though, when we step back and we think about what does wellness tomorrow look like, what does that future look like, I want to argue to you all today, or suggest, that that future represents, if nothing else, a return to core principles of what wellness can mean for all of us. And so today, that's what we're going to focus on in this work. For the next 20 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you information, new insights from Healthline Media that have just been published this morning. You are the first people to see these new research findings. And we're going to do that as a way of opening up this conversation about what is the future of wellness. But we're going to start by grounding ourselves in a little, just a little bit of history to remember how we got to this place. And then we're going to talk about wellness now. We're going to, again, be looking at findings from new research, because at Healthline Media, when we really care about something, what we do is we listen closely to the people who are most affected by it. So we'll talk about the state of wellness today. And then we'll use that as a lens to look forward into the future. So first, again, to talk about the future, we got to start with the past. And I'm going to start by talking about an idea that has taken on a lot of currency recently, particularly over the past 5 years, particularly since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is the idea of self-care. Self-care is a term that folks have been using and talking about more. I read a stat last night that the self-care industry will be worth $450 billion this year. But what is self-care? At Healthline Media, we care a lot about language. We think a lot about the words that we use. And when we talk about self-care, what we mean by that is the personal practices that promote our individual health and well-being over the course of our lives. Self-care is not an outside destination. It is not a point in time. It is definitely not a look. It is internal to us, and it is a lifetime relationship with our own care. Another thing I want to emphasize about self-care is that while it begins with ourselves, it is by no means only about ourselves. We engage in self-care as an act of community care. And this connection and idea actually really started to take importance and more currency in the 1960s and 70s. I want to pay tribute to and honor the work of the great writer, thinker, poet, teacher, Audre Lorde. How many of you are familiar with this quote? Has anybody seen this before? I heard this a while ago, and it kind of changed my life. Audre said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Does that open the aperture a little bit in your thinking about what self-care can mean when we care for ourselves, when we value our well-being, when we strengthen ourselves? That strengthens our communities, and that, particularly for historically marginalized people, is an act of political warfare. It is radical. So as we ground ourselves in the history of wellness and self-care, remembering that for pretty much every known human community, self-care and wellness has been important. As we ground ourselves in that history before we can move forward, let's remember this original sense of self-care as an important, essential part of who we are. But there has been a shift or some new ideas that have come in over the last 40 years or so. In 1980, Robert Crawford coined a term that I find to be really interesting and helpful as I think about what has changed with wellness. This term is healthism. Healthism. And what he said was that healthism represents a shift away from wellness as defined by what we need over the course of our lives to an external understanding of it, to a responsibility to seem well to others. So now it's not about ourselves, it's not about what we need, it's about what other people define as wellness or as self-care, typically involving changing our appearance by buying products, by chasing some kind of a separately defined ideal. And that's a really complicated and intersectional idea as we try to think about how do we move away from that, how do we redefine healthism and move back to these core principles, because I believe the future of wellness and self-care depends on it. So again, at Healthline Media, when we wrestle with these big questions, when we challenge ourselves to really think deeply about an issue, we listen carefully. And so what we did recently was to start to think about wellness now. Where are we today? We asked the people that we serve. We did a survey of over 2,000 Americans, all across, very representative demographically. And we talked to them about this idea of innovation in wellness, the future of health, the future of wellness. What does that mean to them? What's valuable to them about that? And specifically, which technologies are they excited about and interested in? And today, on this stage for the first time, I'll be sharing with you some of the findings from that research. What we found generally was a really complex picture of the relationship between people and their health and wellness. And I think that this will open up new questions, new ideas, and I hope set the stage for a rich day of learning throughout this idea of the future of health. So the first thing that we asked people was we asked them, how do you feel generally about wellness innovations and technologies? How does this interact with your lives? And what we found was surprising. 90%, over 90% of the people that we surveyed said that wellness innovation has the potential to improve our quality of life. Similarly, 9 out of 10 said that these new innovations help them understand how different aspects of their health are connected, different aspects of their own mind and body. So this goes far beyond utility. This is about understanding ourselves. Innovation and technology help us feel connected to ourselves. That's an emotional connection. That is real. In fact, 8 out of 10 respondents said that they feel inspired by the idea of innovation in wellness, by the idea of the future of health. So as we ground ourselves again in where are we today, what does wellness look like now, one of the most important things I would love for you to take out of today's presentation is that this is about wellness for all. 90% of us feel excited, inspired, optimistic about the idea of wellness innovation. But at the same time, our research did show some challenges, and I want to make sure that these are alive in this room as well. 44% of respondents said that wellness, technology, and innovation that's being developed today that they see through the marketing, through the messages and imagery that we collectively create, that those innovations don't have them in mind. So 4 out of 10 people are not connecting with the specific innovations and technologies that they see today. How can this be? How can we have 90% of us feeling excited and inspired by new wellness innovation, and yet over 4 in 10 of us not seeing themselves in the picture? That's what I hope to dig into with you today as we look through these findings. So the first thing that we did, in addition to asking people generally how they feel, was we wanted to get a little clearer understanding of what does this really mean to them. And I think this starts to open up and unpack the possibilities for truly creating a future of wellness for all. One way that we looked at this was through a generational lens, and this is something that marketers and advertisers, like those of us here at Advertising Week, are very familiar with. We asked people, okay, great, you're super inspired by new technology. What exactly do you want these innovations to do for you? What's the value in it for you? And what we saw were some very interesting generational differences. This might start to open up answers to the question of how do we connect with more people through our advertising, through our messaging, through the brands that we build. What we see starting with Gen Z, how many folks here work with Generation Z, think about Gen Z in your work? Probably a lot of us. I think about it all the time. Folks at home, you can raise your hands too. And Gen Z, consistently, from a very, very young age, and far before the pandemic began, has really shown and stood out for the commitment to mental health, the primacy of mental health in their lives. I want to recognize right away that part of this is because of a tragic crisis in mental health among these young people. There are real reasons why mental health is so important to Gen Z. And those are things that we should be continuing to talk about and raising up. I also, however, want to raise up the fact that for these young people, the way that they talk about and think about mental health is a lesson for all generations and something that I believe we've all been learning from over the last 20 months. Continuing to talk about mental health conditions that they may be experiencing, talking about the conditions in the world that are causing them to have these mental health challenges. And in particular, seeing the important connection between mental and physical health. Those things cannot be separated, and if you want to connect in an innovative way with Gen Z, you need to see them as connected. That's what Gen Z told us they want to see in the future of health and wellness. And if our messaging doesn't recognize the primacy of mental health, that's a group of people who will not see themselves in that future that we're trying to create. Moving to the other side of the spectrum, and no shade on millennials and Gen X. I am Gen X. We always get left out of these conversations, but we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to talk about boomers, though, because boomers, as we all know, it's a very large generation. We think about the aging of America and our population, and we think directly about this generation and their needs. And what we found in our research, really important to note, is that this was a generation that was, in fact, more inspired than the rest of our population about new technology. 95% of boomers saying that they do feel that wellness innovations have the potential to improve their quality of life. But at the same time, baby boomers were the generation in our research that was least likely to have adopted new technologies. They were the most likely to say that these new technologies were hard to use. So how do we make the connection? How do we make sure that these specific issues are not the reason why someone who is excited about wellness innovation doesn't think these are being designed for them? Well, they told us in our survey, when we asked boomers, what specifically do you want to see wellness and innovation do for you? They said, help me track my progress towards my goals, and help me work on my goals in my own time. Meet me where I am. That is how we open the aperture. That is how we connect with more people who feel genuine excitement about wellness innovation, but don't think that these technologies are being designed for them today. Another important barrier I want to talk about right now is cost. And this is real. And this is something that we need to think about in many different ways, but I believe it is addressable by those of us in this space here at Advertising Week. 59% of respondents said affordability was a strong need from health and wellness brands. We asked people, what do you want to see brands do? And this came up right away. Affordability, cost was important. Many of the people, in fact, over 70% of low-income respondents, 75% of rural respondents said that technology innovation is just too expensive. I might think it's great for other people, but it's not for me because it is too expensive. And while, again, there are real issues with affordability, some new technologies need to come down in price point at some point before they can be widely adopted. Of course, that's the innovation curve. But I also believe this is a question of perception. When we talk about this idea of healthism, going back to that thought that you're responsible to seem well to others, somehow over the course of these last 40 years, that idea has also come to mean that wellness is a luxury, that self-care is a status symbol. Why did that happen? It doesn't need to be that way. The most popular, most exciting technologies to people in our research were actually, in many cases, very low cost. Smartphone apps, mental health journaling, sleep supports. And so what we can do as advertisers, as marketers, as message bearers, is we can break that association. Wellness is not a luxury. Self-care is a right for every one of us. Can we talk about accessibility? Can we present accessible solutions right alongside those cutting-edge technologies? Can we change this perception? That is an opportunity today, now in wellness. And I hope that this starts to open up this conversation that we'll be leading into for the rest of today, which is wellness tomorrow, right? Where are we headed with all of this? And again, going back to the research, listening carefully to people starts to give us the answer. Once again, grounding us in the core paradox, the exciting opportunity that we see in this research. 90% of the people that we surveyed said innovations in health and wellness can improve the quality of their life. Yet 44% said it's not being designed to meet my needs. This is an opportunity. This is something that we can address as marketers. And I'm going to talk about 4 seismic shifts that at Healthline Media we believe will drive this change. We're going to talk about culturally competent wellness. We're going to talk about wellness within reach to all, wellness for everyone, everywhere. Self-care and well-being needs to be for everyone, regardless of your location. And finally, and I think this is really powerful, wellness for everybody in mind. When we think about self-care over the course of our lives, there will be times when wellness might look a certain way or feel a certain way in our bodies. That may change over time. Every one of us has the right to empower ourselves through self-care, and our vision of the future of wellness must include everyone to truly reflect the potential that we see in that 90% of us who feel excited about this technology. Let's dig in specifically to one of these, culturally competent wellness. I saw some nods in the room. This is something that, again, is a major topic of conversation, and you are going to hear from some incredible innovators on this stage today who are really already engaged driving this change. Maybe some of you are a part of that as well. When we looked at the research, we talked about specific types of technology innovation, and we asked people, pretty standard future survey type stuff, are you interested in these technologies? Have you actually tried them? And what we found was that there's a gap. Again, very typical given that many of the innovations we asked people about were on the farther end of the adoption curve at this point. They're new, right? What we saw was we had a lot of people who were interested, hadn't had a chance to try them yet. And then you had a smaller percentage of people who had already adopted them. Incidentally, of the people who had actually tried many of the innovations we tested in our research, reviews were very, very favorable. We had like 95% of people saying, yeah, this was great. This really helped me with my wellness. So the actual technologies, once adopted, have a positive impact on people's lives. The challenge is adoption. And what we saw in our research is that that gap between interest and adoption is greater among Black, Asian, and Hispanic respondents in our surveys. That's the wellness gap that we point out here, where you have a much larger percentage of people saying, yeah, this sounds great to me. I'd love to try it, but a relatively smaller percentage of people who've actually had the opportunity to adopt it. And again, we open up the possibilities of many different barriers here, many different opportunities to create a different tomorrow. And it's not just about mental health. It is across many different categories. Fitness, nutrition, sleep, across all of these, in particular sleep innovation, in fact. We saw very high rates of interest among Black, Asian, and Hispanic respondents. And yet we saw relatively lower levels of adoption. So the opportunity exists for all of us here across a wide variety of new innovations and ideas. We can bridge the gap. Let's talk about early adopters. When you think of an early technology adopter, this is something, again, that has been a kind of classic element of doing these kinds of future-oriented research. We ask people, how likely are you to try out new technologies? Do you consider yourself one of the first in your crowd to do it? Are you an early adopter? And what we found was that Black and Indigenous people of color who responded to our survey, most of them, 52%, said, yeah, I'm an early adopter. I love this stuff, right? Versus 36% of the white respondents. So the image, the idea of what does an early adopter of wellness look like needs to diversify. We must see a broader picture. We must center early adopters of all ethnicities, all generations, all ages, all locations. So this, to me, is when we talk about the future of wellness, when we talk about the future of health, this is our opportunity. Collectively, can we create messages that center early adopters, that center people who are genuinely excited about new technologies? And as a reminder, that's 90% of us, but many of whom are not today seeing themselves in the picture. In the same book of essays where Audre Lorde shared her very famous wisdom about self-care, she also wrote, Tomorrow belongs to those of us who conceive of it as belonging to everyone, who lend ourselves, the best of ourselves to it, and with joy. With joy. Let's bring some joy back, right? Tomorrow belongs to those of us who conceive of it as belonging to everyone. 90% of us feel optimism, potential, excitement about the future of wellness. Can we expand the picture? Can we open the aperture in the messaging, the marketing, the imagery that we deliver, the products that we develop, so that all of us share in that great potential? Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first time that we at Healthline Media have shared this new research with anyone. And we'll be walking through these with you. We hope that we can continue this conversation, and we also hope that everyone here, as you go through your day, will ask good questions, challenge each other, challenge us. Please come and talk to us. We would really love to engage in this discussion with you. And after today, after this session, we're actually sharing these findings with everyone. Our new report, The Future of Wellness, is available now at healthlinemedia.com. I would encourage everyone to please take a look, come and download the report. There's so many more insights. We get into a lot of specific technologies across all of those categories: fitness, nutrition, sleep, mental health, and beyond. And we look at specific examples of how organizations like all of ours, the marketers, the branders, the storytellers, the developers, can make a difference. So please come and check it out. It's at Healthline Media. If you're at home, you can do it later today, right now. And we hope to engage with you on that. And also, I would love to see you back here at 11:30, where we'll be having a conversation with 3 truly inspiring innovators, all of whom demonstrate what it looks like to center all people, to center our communities, and the importance of self-care in our work, and the incredibly innovative solutions that they have come up with led by that. So thank you so much. Have an incredible advertising week. Welcome back.